Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Safe House, brought to you by the Safe House Initiative. I'm Jeff Edwards, co-chair of the Safe House Initiative, and your host for today's podcast. If you happen to speak one of the Romance languages, let's say, French, Spanish, and you understand Latin, you understand a lot more than most in speaking the language, or at least the meaning of words. And so today we're going to take a kind of a uh, I guess an adventure in origins. Where does cyber and insurance and risk management, where are all these words coming from, and the meanings? And today we're really very fortunate to have Matt Cullina with us. He's the head of the global cyber insurance group within TransUnion. Hey, Matt, welcome to the Safe House.
Oh, great to be here. Thanks, Jeff.
Yeah, no, we're real excited about having this conversation. So, Matt, first time, welcome to the show. And why don't you introduce yourself to our audience and kind of say, here's kind of your journey to where you are today.
Sure, and really happy to be here. Sure. So it's Matt Cullina here. Like you said, I lead the cyber team here at TransUnion. The journey's been quite interesting to get to here. We've been with TransUnion since an acquisition in 2021. Prior to that time, we were a company, independent company called Cyberscout, which has been in business since 2003. So my way back origin is in the insurance world. I'm actually a history major, so I really love origins and digging into kind of where things began. But started off in the insurance world, and most people think, if you ask them that are not in market, think it's kind of a boring industry. But really, insurance kind of delves into all aspects of our lives in one way or another. And I started my career really handling complex claims and cases involving emerging risk, like environmental risk, new product defects, construction defects, things that were hard to explain, needed a lot of research, and often where there would end up being a dispute between the insurance company and the policyholder because of some nuance or gray area in the wording and the language and what they purchased. And so that ultimately led to a career in product development and product research for the insurance market. And really that was focused on new products for emerging risks. And so right in the early 2000s, we were researching identity theft. And really, at the time, it was the fastest growing white collar crime. It was kind of a newer thing in the public sphere, although identity theft, as a term, dates to the 1960s. Really, it started to boom in the late 90s, early 2000s. And so what the federal government did is they passed a law called, just updating the FCRA law or FACRA laws to provide more victim support for folks that are experiencing identity theft. So almost like victim rights, that they could, argue with their banks or financial institutions and basically either be reimbursed or have whatever fraudulent accounts that were set up stricken from their records. So it was really a time that there was kind of a disconnect where there was a fast growing white collar crime, and a lot of people didn't understand how it worked or how to fix it when it happened to them. And even the detection was really hard to figure out. So a lot of these scams and fraud, fraud occurrences just kept it snowballing for people, and they would ultimately find out, and people would have set up numerous accounts in their name, and really it became almost impossible to unravel without kind of the know-how. And so that's what we were researching, is how could we solve that for people. And that's when I first came across the company that was the predecessor company to Cyberscout.
Yeah, so in order to do product development, you had to do all this research to understand that subject. Is that sort of the origin bent that you have in your background?
Yeah, so it all comes down to really getting to the root of all things, and understanding kind of where the risk lies, how it's changed, and with all of these emerging risk issues now, cyber tends to be my core focus. It all comes down to awareness curves, right? Where the threat actors tend to be several steps ahead of the general population, and they tend to basically um, take advantage of the vulnerable, right? Take advantage of folks that either are thinking that what's happening is kind of everyday occurrence, they don't really understand they're being co-opted. Um, and so basically, in our world, it's about educating, because this is a people problem. These emerging risks, especially these cyber risks, are, everybody thinks they're kind of a technology problem, but what it really comes down to is it's a people problem, because that's who's being manipulated in a lot of the risks that we're seeing. So what we found, early days, the culmination of my early research was you need experts helping people. This isn't a prophylactic technology solve that's going to fix everything, because the risks keep changing so rapidly. And so what we did early days is design kind of a perfect service model, and it was meant to be like a super empathetic support for people that are going through a crisis. And what it comes down to, the origin of the word crisis itself is really interesting. It actually is of Greek origin. And most people think crisis, kind of hair on fire. I don't know where to turn. I don't know how to get out of this. Crisis in Greek really means decision, or to decide, or to choose.
Huh.
And it's really to signify an inflection point where you have a situation happening, you have some understanding of what's happening, and then there's a crossroad. I can go left, I can go right. The early origin was really tied to kind of medical decisions. So you kind of know the diagnosis: are you going to live, or are you going to die? How do you fix that problem? And so what we found is, if we can put live bodies, experts, right there when people are at that inflection point, at that crisis point, we can listen first, kind of hear their story, what they're going through, and then with our expertise, or kind of multivariate expertise on our teams, we could basically troubleshoot and triage that event step by step. And so that's been our origin story as a company and what we do. Obviously, the risks have evolved, like, crazily evolved. Back when we first started doing kind of consumer resolution for identity theft and cyber risk, it was not even cyber. It was really snail mail fraud, phone fraud, phone scams. And so all the early identity theft situations were kind of pre-digital, were really involved with, stealing people's mail, co-opting their information in that mail, and impersonating them, or calling them up and saying, "Hey, you just won an award. You want a prize? Give us some personal information, and we'll get you that prize." So it was all kind of these rudimentary scam approaches. In fact, one of the first things we did early days is we used to sell super secure mailboxes. Like, that's how pre-digital everything we did.
Wait. Are you talking like a mailbox? Like a
Like
letter
physical?
would go in there?
Yeah. Yeah.
Really? Okay.
100%.
Oh
And
my God.
like kind of indestructible kind of thing. And so it just shows you like how things have, it's still kind of the similar tactics, it's just different mediums, right? It went from that to like email fraud. So you remember the Nigerian prince scams and all, that was all email. So that was early email when Yahoo and AOL and all the early email companies came out. Before long, scams started happening on that medium. So so really it's similar tactics, just different in different modes of transportation for that fraud.
So in a way, if you just think of the old scams, how things had been done, you can apply it pretty handily to a much more sophisticated, high-tech way today.
Exactly.
Okay.
And so getting to kind of the word cyber itself, I do a lot of educating and kind of public speaking, and I often start my talks with asking the audience this question, and oftentimes the audience is filled with cyber insurance experts, underwriters, claims people, incident responders for cyber insurance. So they know cyber insurance top to bottom. They know cyber risk top to bottom. but they don't know the origin of the word cyber itself, which I think is super interesting.
Huh.
It actually is, another Greek derivation that really, if you think about kind of the Greeks when they were kind of the world dominating, their technology, their innovation was shipping and basically being able to go from one place to the next with ease and conquer new lands, etc.
Okay.
So the word cyber really means to steer, as in to steer a ship.
Really?
And
Huh.
so what it comes down to as it relates to what we do, it's basically people's control over machines. How do you control the machine and not let the machine control you? The word in modern times really came to fore right after World War II, and the original term was cybernetics. A social scientist named Norbert Wiener came up with it. He wrote a book about it, and with all the advancements and innovation coming out of the war effort,
Yeah.
it was like kind of daunting for people to like, this is like too much technology too fast. And so social scientists came in to really try to help describe what our roles are in all of this. Where do we fit with all this advancement in technology? Like people will never go away from the equation, but how you engage is the tactics change over time as technology advances. So I think that when I talk to folks about it, around kind of the origin of the word cyber itself, it really helps, with kind of basically address the learning curve. Like this is
Yeah.
something where you have to be a student of the game, whether you like this or not. This is our world today, and you have to understand cyber risks. And with some simple tactics, once you have some base understanding, you can really withstand a lot of significant scam types. And this is just kind of people versus people, not the
Yeah.
technology surpassing us.
Yeah, and I think that it's interesting because to steer technology, and you talked about having your live bodies and doing diagnostics earlier. With the advent of artificial intelligence, there's a lot of angst in the market saying, I'm losing control of steering my cyber technology. Does that hold any water in that thought process?
Yeah, I think AI is just the latest thing, right? And I think
Yeah.
what it comes down to is we all have to be able to utilize those AI tools. Over time, they're going to become more and more important in our lives, right? So it's something where you can't just ignore it and say, "Oh, it's too much for me. I'm too old. I've been around too long to learn something new."
Yeah.
We all have to kind of maintain a curiosity and really be able to engage with these tools, because it's not about humans being replaced. It's about making our lives better with these new technologies. And, if you look at the other side of the coin, the threat actors are not afraid of AI. They're diving in, right? They're diving in and seeing, well, okay, well, how can I use that computing power, that speed decisioning, to better my threat approaches and scams and whatever they're up to.
So what about, can you kind of take us on a tour of the origins of insurance, risk management, and then how it kind of rolled into a modern day version of risk management, and more specifically cyber insurance? Kind of a wide topic there, but maybe delve into those.
Yeah, so again, it's the kind of thing where some types of insurance approaches to insurance have been around for eons, and so they're even in Hammurabi's code, like in the Babylonian times. There's record of insurance for shipping, for trade,
Mm.
that you would get compensated for acts of God, quote unquote,
Mm.
if your trade went missing or your ship sunk, or uh, you know things were set aflame, etc.
Mhm.
And so even in the Egyptian times, you had like some forms of life insurance where there'd be some sort of contribution that you would make, on a regular basis, and then your family would be compensated if you were to die
Mm.
unexpectedly or kind
Mm.
of too soon. Um, Really, as it kind of moves up into more modern times, The Great Fire of London was a huge push for insurance to be more mass adopted. So this gets into property insurance, and
Yeah.
really, in that case, it was the peril of fire, right? So
Hmm.
um, the insurance was around before the Great Fire of London, but it became something that it became much more paramount and an issue that you needed to solve for. I think 15,000 houses were burned in that fire.
Mm. Mm.
Several parts of London just were destroyed.
Wow.
So it got people's attention, and in the kind of the Americas, during colonial times,
Yeah.
I think there's some record of insurance, dating back to the early 1700s. And even, Ben Franklin, Mr. Innovation,
Yeah.
he started one of the first insurance companies that still exists today. It's a client of ours, Philadelphia Contributorship.
Mm.
And what was really interesting at that time is that, this was all the great fear was fire, right? Um, and what the companies would do is they would issue what are called fire marks, which are basically metal plaques that you
Mm.
would put on the front of your building or house or business. And it
Mm.
would have the brand of the insurance company that you purchased insurance from. So in that time, there weren't any kind of formal fire departments. It was mostly volunteer fire departments. And
Yeah.
sometimes the insurance companies would fund fire departments. So if there was a fire in your
Huh.
neighborhood and the volunteer fire brigade came to your door and they saw the fire mark plaque on your door, your home would get the water first.
Huh.
And so it was really kind of a rudimentary way of identifying who purchased insurance and who didn't. And there was also prophylactic things that were done, preventative stuff. Obviously, things like brick houses were safer to fire than wood houses,
Right.
and so there was kind of also kind of underwriting going on that's
Interesting.
similar to today.
Yeah.
But it just shows you that the mass adoption of insurance obviously became regulated and mandatory in a lot of respects, like with auto insurance. But early days, it was all around kind of the core peril of fire. And I think between that and kind of shipping risk, inland marine, they call it risk,
Hmm.
those are probably the two early origin stories for how insurance spread.
Yeah.
And when it comes to cyber risk, it really comes down to insurance companies, cover tangible goods, right? They cover your
Right.
car, your
Yeah.
home. They don't cover data. How would they replace data if you lost it or had it
Yeah.
stolen or destroyed?
Yeah.
And so, it really became kind of in the advent of the dot-com eras
Yeah.
in Silicon Valley, um, those emerging companies like the eBays of the world, they needed to purchase insurance for their style of risk, which tended to be these intangible digital risks. And so, kind of the early types of cyber insurance started out as errors and omission coverage. So it was really professional liability coverage for the business itself.
Uh-huh.
And the early forays into cyber were really around data breach insurance. And so, starting with California in the
Hmm.
early 2000s, states started passing laws that said if you expose your customer or employees' data, you have to do certain things. You have to notify
Okay.
them. You have to tell them what you lost or exposed. You have to provide some level of support. So these data breach notification laws started spreading far and wide. And once that regulatory regime is in place, there's kind of you have a method, you have a regulatory obligation to respond. And if you do have a data breach, and that includes reporting, so it's kind of a sunshine law. And so there's
Mm.
cost for that. There's
Hmm.
expense to that. You have to hire lawyers. You have to do, investigations. You have to hire forensic teams. And so those expenses started to pile up. And so that became kind of emergent kind of reason to purchase this new type of insurance. And all of that really started happening in the early 2000s. And And so really cyber insurance has greatly evolved, and it now includes almost every type of risk related to cyber and digital risk you can think of.
Yeah.
Cyber extortion, ransomware is a good example. So now those events are covered specifically. If you get hacked as a business and your systems are down and you can operate, you can be paid for lost profits. So there's business interruption coverage. There's coverage if you get sued because of the cyber event that you caused or were responsible for. And so it's really kind of a combination of a lot of different types of insurance that you wouldn't be able to purchase, via your normal business insurance or home insurance or auto insurance. So it became this kind of specialty product that was kind of an amalgamation of a lot of different types of coverage.
That's our podcast for today. I'm Jeff Edwards for the Safe House Initiative. Thanks for joining us, and remember, be safe, be resilient, and be kind to each other. For more information about the Safe House Initiative, please use your mobile device to scan the QR code on the screen or send us an email at info@safehouseinitiative.org or visit us on our website, safehouseinitiative.org. We look forward to hearing from you.